Yeah, so good morning. Let us now begin our discussion on the play Othello that is prescribed for our study. Allow me to make a presentation to take us through the beginning of the play. Yes, so when we discussed the first folio, which came out in the year 1623. We talked about the threefold division that the editors had made, who categorized the 37 plays of Shakespeare into three categories: the comedies, the histories, and the tragedies. We also discussed the division that Edward Dowden, the 19th century critic, had made of Shakespeare's career, and how he saw Shakespeare maturing over the years, beginning with the light comedies and the early histories, and then moving on, improving himself and writing the immensely popular romantic comedies and making a distinct mark in the theatrical circles of London in Elizabethan England, and then coming to that stage where he was to leave the most permanent imprint forever with the presentation of his great tragedies. We remember that out of his depths was the term that Dowden used to describe that phase of Shakespeare's life when he was engaged in the writing of the terrific tragedies, the soul shattering tragedies, the most famous of which are the four tragedies which are often clubbed together as the four greatest tragedies of Shakespeare: King Lear, Macbeth, Hamlet, and Othello. And it is therefore through the play Othello that we will understand more about Shakespearean tragedy and about Shakespeare as a playwright. Okay, so to get into the play, I think we need to transport ourselves to Italy during the 15th century. That is where the play Othello is set. I'm sure you know something about Othello. I'm sure many of you would have seen at least some of the movie versions. It has been adapted like almost every other Shakespearean play. This one has also been adapted onto the silver screen in various languages, including Malayalam. You have Othello, Malayalam and Hindi. Omkara, the Hindi movie, uh, and what was the name of the Kaliyattam, the Malayalam movie? They're all based on Othello. So we now take a flight in time and space to Italy. Just to give you an image of Italy there. Italy, the land of canals. It is known as, it is surrounded, the whole city is of course networked with canals, and it is also you have the Mediterranean Sea as well. And this is a play that has as its background some of the important wars of those times, especially the wars between Italy and the Ottoman Empire, some of the European forces and the Ottoman Empire. In other words, a kind of a holy war fought between the Christian Europeans and the Muslim Ottomans. And that is the background against which this play is set. Now, do you know the full title? The image that you have there on the screen is one of the editions of the play, but it does not give you the whole title. What is the whole title of the play? Othello dash, like you have Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. That is the whole title, the full title. Othello, similarly, can be completed when you add a few words to it. Othello dash dash dash. Can anyone complete that? Othello, the Moor of Venice. That is the full title. Othello, the Moor of Venice. I have just put up a painting there for you to just get a glimpse of what this play should foreground. When you look at this painting, before you enter the rest of the details put up on the slide, just take a look at the painting there and tell me what impressions strike you the most. Some of you can unmute yourself and speak. Read the painting there. Nothing strikes you? Is it just an ordinary painting, or is it just something that you would just, okay, fine, and take your eyes away from? Doesn't it speak something to you?
Ma'am, the color difference.
Is it on race?
Very good. I think Chitrangada, Sneha, and Nayanthara have all answered. Exactly. You have a black man and a white woman there. Even now, it is not the most common of things. And to think of 14th and 15th century Europe with this kind of a situation definitely involves something big. And that is indeed the issue of the racial divide or the color divide, which is very central to this play. You have the Moor of Venice. The Moor is actually a word which means, which was used to refer to a person of African descent who belongs to the Muslim community. And I'll put up a map for you to see that better. You know, the way many Africans would just cross over to Europe, and for a very long period of time, in fact, the Moors held sway in the Iberian Peninsula, where you have countries like Spain and Portugal. For about 5 or 6 centuries, actually, it was the rule of the Ottomans in Spain, which is why even today, Spain is left with a lot of Arabic and Muslim influence in its architecture, in its culture in general. And it is also something that paved the way for the entry of Asian knowledge in mathematics and the sciences from India, from different parts of Arabia, from Africa to Europe. It is on the basis of this that actually the Europeans built themselves, and the Renaissance, in some small measure at least, owes to this arrival of knowledge from the eastern part of the world, in algebra, in physics, in so many other fields of study. The knowledge and the wisdom that came from the East, in no small measure, helped the Europeans to build themselves as the world leaders that they became in no time at all. After which, they went on to colonize the rest of the world. Okay, so that is the irony of history. Anyway, the Moor of Venice, it is a play that is set, as I told you in the previous class, like all most of Shakespearean tragedies, in 5 acts. It was written probably sometime during the period 1603 to 1604, again coinciding with some of the dark days of Shakespeare's own life. And it was published as a play in a text form in a quarto edition in 1622, before the first folio came out. And like every other play of Shakespeare, Shakespeare never wrote an original play, in the sense that the stories would never have been his own. He borrowed, immensely from various sources. That itself forms a very interesting branch of study. Shakespeare's sources. All the plays had their stories, their plots supplied by other sources. But Shakespeare added the Shakespearean touch to each one of these stories and made them unique. And like most of the plays, many of the plays, this one also had an Italian source. It was actually the story of Othello and Desdemona, the white woman whom you see in there, was narrated in 16th century Italian work named the Hecatomiti, Deadly Hecatomiti, written by Giambattista Giraldi Cinthio. So Cinthio's Hecatomiti was the source, main source. But Cinthio himself probably had based his own work on the earlier Italian work, the 14th century collection of stories, Decameron. It is a collection of 100 stories written by Boccaccio. That is an Italian classic. Shakespeare has borrowed a few of the plots of some of his plays from the Decameron also. But the direct source was probably the Hecatomiti, in which you have the story of a girl named Desdemona. The focus is entirely on Desdemona in that play. And it is more of a kind of a moralistic kind of story where, you have the story pointing out in a didactic manner in order to teach, the perils that await you when you disobey, when you go against convention. And it goes without saying that such perils await only girls. Isn't that so? When a girl defies convention and rebels, then there will be great tragedy that awaits her. In Malayalam, we have the saying, Ila mulla, what? Ila mullil veenalum, mulla elayil veenalum. We know what the rest of the proverb is. In a similar manner, this moralistic tale in the Hecatomiti, with its focus on Desdemona, wanted to convey the perils of disobedience. But Shakespeare made it a different play altogether. He added a great deal of wealth and richness to it and gave it an entirely new orientation. In the first place, he took the focus away from Desdemona and placed it on Othello and the deep conflict in Othello's own mind, the troubled conscience of Othello, the kind of burden that Othello carried within himself because of various reasons, which we will be discussing during the course of the play, and which ultimately led to his fall. Okay, so that is how Shakespeare makes it a tragedy, so unique and so different from the Hecatomiti story. And in addition to that, he adds many characters too, and chief among whom Iago is, of course, the chief villain of this play. There was an Iago in the story too, who did not get much of an importance. But here in Shakespeare's play, Iago himself gets developed as a full-fledged character, as do many other characters too. So you have this whole tapestry, the painting being enriched by Shakespeare in his own unique way, with even the minor characters given a great deal of depth, as a result of which you can, analyze each character in depth and again make a study in contrast between Othello and the others and the kind of dynamics that are played out between them in a context where there is such a great deal of racial difference. Therefore, it's a play that makes us ponder over issues which are relevant even today in a way that the Hecatomiti story had never done. It was a plain tale in the Hecatomiti, but that has been developed into this rich, reflective tale or play which continues to enchant readers, critics, and philosophers even today. So that is the introduction. This is the Hecatomiti from which Shakespeare took the story, but the Hecatomiti itself would probably have been based on some of the stories in the Decameron, the earlier written by Boccaccio, the 14th century Italian work. And in addition to this, Shakespeare never probably stopped with just one source. Again, that speaks a great deal about Shakespeare's greatness. This person who was not so well read, yet did a great deal of research on his own, in his own way probably, delved into the stories from various countries, from the stories that he heard from the travelers who returned from various parts of the world. And in addition, he also analyzed works like, for example, a geographical history of Africa, written by this person named, the name is not very clear there, John, I forget the full name. I'll give you the name later. But this work, which talked about the Africans, it was a work which naturally, like an ethnographic study, it made stereotypical representations of Africa. An African is like this. He will have the color of, he will be black in color. He would have thick lips. He would have curly hair, and he would have a very uh, rather low moral values, and such stereotypical representations. Wherever the British went, they made such ethnographic studies, putting the natives of each continent, Africa, Asia, into tight containers, adding attributes to them, and thereby defining them according to their own studies, labeling them. You have images of ethnographic studies that they conducted in India, again, where people were labeled. They would photograph people from various tribes and communicate these images, which is why, for a very long period of time, the Western world was under the impression that India is like this. It is a land of dash, dash, dash. Africa is a continent of dash, dash, dash. They had no hesitation in calling Africa the dark continent. So this kind of, also, Shakespeare would also have borrowed some of the traits of Africans to depict in Othello, based on a study made in this work, like a geographical history of Africa. So these are the three major sources. Then, we go to the, as I told you, the action of the play probably took place. When you read the lines of the play, you realize that in the background, the main characters are all engaged in this major war. Othello is one of the major figures of the Venetian army. Venice, as part of Europe, was in battle with the Ottomans, from Africa. And Othello is, even though he originally is from Africa, he is now a very powerful member of the Venetian army. So from the references that you have in the play, it is more or less clear that the battle that is being described in this play is one of the major battles fought between the Europeans and the Ottomans. This is the Battle of Lepanto. And the Battle of Lepanto took place mainly in Cyprus, the island of Cyprus. So it is the fact that a major part of this play is set in Cyprus, even though it begins in Venice, and even though it is called the Amour of Venice, the action of the play, the later action of the play, unfolds in Cyprus. And that is why we can conclude, based on the historical references in the play, that the background of the play is the Battle of Lepanto. And in various instances, the play mirrors the tension between the Venetians and the Ottomans in general. In other words, the Christians and the Muslims. And this enmity between these two empires, the Venetian and the Ottoman Empire, was something that continued well into the 18th century. This is the map that depicts the action of the play. You have, of course, Italy here, and this is the city of Venice. And across the Mediterranean Sea, you have the island of Cyprus here, and the action of the play is set in the island of Cyprus. The Battle of Lepanto in 1571 may have influenced the depiction of Venice's defense of Cyprus against the Turks, Ottomans or the Turks. So this world map again can tell you how, from these regions, from Morocco, from Algeria, and these regions, and also from the Arabian Peninsula, they would travel to Europe. It was so easy for people from Morocco, especially, to go to Spain. It's just that tiny little Gibraltar, the Strait of Gibraltar is there. They would just swim across. Even today, you have the refugees moving towards Europe from different parts of Africa and Asia, swimming across these regions, the Mediterranean Sea largely, and they reach the country of Spain. And that is why from Morocco, probably it is from there that the word Moor comes. Anyway, it was a word that was used to describe a member of a northwestern African Muslim group, people of mixed ancestry, half Arab, half Berber. Berber is a tribe. And during the 8th century, these members, the Moors, as part of the Ottoman Empire, they conquered the Iberian Peninsula and remained there till the 15th century. It was only in 1492 that the last of these Moors were driven away from European provinces. So against that historical background, we will study the play which will bring our way these characters. These are the actors, the characters, the dramatis personae, as it would be depicted in any text of Shakespeare. So you have Othello, the central character, a Moorish general in the Venetian army. Remember that he's an outsider. That status of the outsider is something that adds so much color to the play. Color, again, in inverted commas. Color in every way, literally and metaphorically too. So he's elevated to the very powerful position of the general. And that is where he meets the Venetian lady, Desdemona, daughter of a Venetian senator, a very respected member of the Venetian Senate named Brabantio, a rich man there. And then you have Iago, who is another member of the army, but who has a rather lowly position. He is the flag bearer, known as the ensign or ancient. That is the, in the army, you have various designations, and the ensign or the flag bearer is rather much low down in the ranks, and that is the major reason for Iago's hatred of Othello, which is one of the major inciting incidents or actions of or thrust points of the play. So Iago feels that he has been belittled. He, a white man, has been belittled, and a black man has been elevated to the powerful position of the general in the Venetian army. Then you have Iago's wife, Emilia, who is very close to Desdemona, which makes things very easy for Iago to manipulate. And then you have Othello's second in command, the lieutenant Cassio, a very noble man, but who has his own weaknesses, as a result of which, again, things become easy for Iago. Roderigo, a Venetian gentleman, the Duke of Venice. Then a few other characters like people like Roderigo were all entirely created by Shakespeare. So also some of the other women characters, Lodovico, Graciano, these are other Venetian gentlemen, the Venetian senators, an official in Cyprus named Montano, and then another woman, a woman in Cyprus who's in love with Cassio, Bianca, and a clown. As I told you, Shakespeare's tragedies are so unique because of the comic element that he brings in to lighten the heavy scenes. And you have a clown who's like a comic servant to Othello and Desdemona. Most of the aristocratic houses would have these official entertainers. They would pay these entertainers. So when they would host these huge dinners, they would have the entertainer coming and performing scenes that would evoke laughter in the guests. So you have one such clown here. The other gentlemen of Cyprus, the messengers, the servants, the sailors, and so on, who keep alive that theme of warfare throughout and remind us of the trouble brewing in the Mediterranean Ocean. Okay, so it is against that background that we enter the play. The first, 5 acts, and each act is divided into many scenes. The first scene, which I want you to listen to, I got a recording of the play. I think I will also get. Do you have the text of the play with you? Anyone? I mean, do you have it? You wouldn't have bought the text, I'm sure. So therefore, for this class, I will present maybe. Will it be possible for me to present and no? Then I won't be able to play this. Therefore, or let me try to go to a website and do it. Okay. Anyway, the first act is set in the streets of Venice, and you have the two characters there. You know, you can see the canals of Venice. Instead of streets there in Venice, people travel through the canals. They get into little boats known as the gondola, and you have Roderigo and Iago entering the scene there, and it is in the midst of some action. Shakespeare's plays always begin with some excitement. It's never on a very low key that the plays begin. There is something that is imminent, something in the air, and that air of suspense and mystery is something that adds to the keynote of the play, especially in the tragedies. And when this play begins, you can see I've also got a recording of a bit of the first scene. These two people, Iago and Rodrigo, are coming onto the scene, and it is clear that they have been discussing something. And it is something that is not revealed to us, some secret matter, something is afoot, something has happened, and they are agog about it. Something has enraged Rodrigo. We realize that Rodrigo had entrusted Iago with something in spite of that. And he has also given Iago a lot of money to accomplish that. It is only later that we realize that this was his intention. His intention was actually to get close to Desdemona. But what has happened is that Desdemona has run away with someone. And this is what now, in this scene, during the course of the scene, they shout out to Brabantio. You can see him coming out on his balcony there. He was sleeping, and here you have Iago and Rodrigo awakening him and telling him that there are thieves afoot. And he comes out, and the thievery that has happened is the fact that Desdemona has been stolen. In other words, Desdemona has eloped. And with whom? With a black man. It is a matter of great sacrilege as far as Brabantio is concerned. And it is that scene of tumble and action that this play begins with. It enrages Brabantio, and you have him getting a search party to go and search for Othello and Desdemona. Listen to the play. Let me see if I can. You can